Hey, it's IB Nation Sports Talk. We are rolling on a Tuesday. A little bit of big news today. Vince D'Addario is in the house for one. Jesse's going to be here in a little bit, but we're starting off with Vince. We might have all three of us for a little bit. I don't know, but it finally happened. The day after Sam Hartman announced that he was going to opt out of the Sun Bowl, and after a weekend of an extra day of hand wringing and all that stuff by some Irish fans, Riley Leonard announced that he is indeed transferring from Duke to Notre Dame. And I found something out today, Vince, that I didn't know before. Did you know that Riley Leonard's great grandfather, James E. Curran, played for Notre Dame, class of 1940?
Nope, sure didn't.
Just found this out today. Just found it out today.
That was back when Notre Dame was extremely good.
Yeah.
So, there's
right.
that.
That's right. And apparently he grew up in Alabama.
Yep.
But big enough Notre Dame fan that his favorite movie is Rudy, apparently.
Who knew?
Do you think that, he was going crazy here a few weeks back when they released that director's cut, with the new scene that everybody was flipping out? Like, was he hardcore? Did he have a hard take on they should have had that scene in the original Rudy?
I mean, if he's a true Notre Dame man, then yes, he was beating the table at Thanksgiving, letting everybody know that they should have kept that one in. Come on.
Christopher says class of 1940, LOL. I mean, it was his great grandpa, like the guy. It's not like, the guy's been around. It was great granddad.
That makes sense. My grandfather was born in 1906, so he's even older than that. So, yeah, the timing makes sense, folks. Great grandpa.
DK's in rare form already. So, coming after my Cowboys shirt. Just found out his whole family hates the Cowboys. DK slipped this one in earlier. Why would Audric opt out of this show? He listens every night. Well, if that's true, Audric, welcome as always. If he really listens every night, but if that's true, he also knows where to go as soon as he declares for the draft. He is welcome on this show anytime. I mean, he's always welcome on this show. It's harder to get, you can't get players on the show when they're playing for Notre Dame.
No.
Let's just put it that way.
No, you can't. But once he declares, he is, doesn't
Right
have to worry about the shackles that bind him.
That's right.
As a Notre Dame player.
I'll send you my email. You can contact me directly right here. Pre-draft. Look, we would welcome that more than anything. Let's talk about Riley Leonard.
I mean, John,
go ahead.
How long have we been waiting for this to happen? I
know.
This is like the worst kept secret on the face of the planet, not because of Irish Breakdown, but because of a lot of other people out there that decided they had to, let the beans spill. But this is the worst kept secret, I think, of the season in the transfer portal, of a guy that was going into the portal and where he was going to go with the no contact and everything else. Like, here he is at Notre Dame, finally able to make the announcement about 10 days later than we all wanted it to be.
People started to get a little worried yesterday. They were worried last Friday. Remember
the day after
why isn't he committed yet?
On campus.
He's been off campus for 8 hours. Why is he not committed yet?
Ridiculous. Come on. Ridiculous. And we all saw the video that came out, right? Obviously, that video was recorded when he was on campus. And so shouldn't surprise a lot of people that it took a minute to put that together. Get all the ducks in a row.
Well done video, just like Sam Hartman. I don't know if he put it together himself or if maybe he had a little help or, whatever. But
my guess is he had a little help.
Done.
But, that's just me, speculating.
He didn't use Foo Fighters like Hartman did, so that's a little bit of a ding right there.
Not wrong.
Jesse's here, though. Jesse, after a full day of work and guarding the Christmas tree. How are you today?
I am well. I am still drinking coffee. That's how long my day has been today. And then right before we were about to go on, like 15, 30 minutes ago, my computer froze. Like the internet wasn't working. Nothing wasn't working. And so that last 15 minutes I needed to be right on time kind of got screwed over. But I am here to join in on the excitement and the we got the quarterback finally. It's
jubilation.
official.
That's exactly right. We had all these contingency plans. Like if the announcement came yesterday, okay, so if it happens at this time, this is what happens during the show. If it happens at this time, this happens during the show. But if it happens at this time, this happens during the show. And then fortunately we got the Sam Hartman news because we never got that announcement yesterday. So we got Riley Leonard today instead. Jess, how big is this for Notre Dame? How big do you think this is, the Riley Leonard commitment?
I think this was ultimately the biggest, I guess you would say, issue, or the biggest question mark for the offseason is what they were going to do ultimately at quarterback. Was it going to be developing the young guys and giving them a shot? Was it going to be bringing in someone that experience and letting them take the reins now? Or is it going to be a combination of, getting Riley Leonard and also still developing Carr, Minchie, maybe Angeli if he hangs around while Leonard is playing as well. So I find it to be a huge deal. And I think what the bigger implication for me is that this is Jared Parker's guy. And I think I talked about that a little bit last week. I just think that this is, for Marcus Freeman and Jared Parker, this is a big year because you went out and got your guy. You're sticking with your offensive coordinator, and you're letting your offensive coordinator basically, run the offense that he wants to run with the quarterback that he wants. And so I think you are lining yourself up to not have potential for more failure, but I think you're inviting more expectations now for everyone.
Oh, for sure. The expectations are going to be sky high now. And I just saw this. Where did the comment go from Michael about, like we've been saying, the portal wide receivers wouldn't be committing if they weren't sure who the quarterback was. They had to have pretty good word on who the quarterback was going to be before you get wide receivers with that kind of experience. And I think there's definitely some validity to that. And things are going to look different. I think that, this is big because this is who they wanted. This obviously, as soon as the news that he was going to go into the portal came out, he was connected immediately to Notre Dame. And we know that there's been talk about this throughout the season. He had other options, Ohio State being one of those options. He picked Notre Dame. And, it's because they're not just playing for the future, even though there is a case that can be made, as we've talked about. Do you stick within? Do you develop your own guys? Do you roll with that for a season and, kind of let that lead you into, infinity and beyond or whatever? Or do you go out and make another move like this? And they decided that it was time to go out and make a move like this. They're saying it's go time. We can win now time by getting not just the veteran quarterback, but those veteran receivers that they've got around him as well.
I think a big thing too, Vince, sorry to cut you off there, but I got a lot of thoughts going around in the head today. So I can't let it escape. I gotta get it out.
Slow the roll with the coffee. Maybe that would help.
But I think the pressure of the current college football landscape and transfer portal had an effect on Riley Leonard coming to Notre Dame as well. Because it's one thing to say, yeah, we want to sit back and develop, sure. But I just think with the portal and again in the NIL, like you have to win now, and no one's going to be waiting on you to develop your quarterbacks, and everyone else is going to the portal to get the players that they need to fill the holes in their roster. I mean, look at Colorado. They went out and basically got a whole new offensive line in the portal. So I get it that it sucks. And yeah, I was on the horse of, I would like to see Notre Dame develop quarterback, but at the same time, it's a win now type of situation. And with the portal, when you can go out and get players to win now, I think you have to go out and get your guy. So ultimately, I'm really happy that they went out and got Riley Leonard for that reason. But I guess what I'm saying is 5 years ago, I don't know if we would have saw the same urgency essentially.
Well, I would say that the clock started ticking on the 2024 portal quarterback the second that Tyler Buckner jumped into the portal. I mean, that's, if you wanted a homegrown, if he would have stayed on the roster, Tyler Buckner would be the starting quarterback in 2024.
He's the same type of quarterback as as Riley Leonard.
Yeah, and then that's
And
your
I mean,
homegrown guy. And
yeah,
then you
that was
hand it
part of
off.
the plan. That was
You
part of the
hand-
original
right.
plan, but Tyler
Exactly.
Buckner had other plans.
Yes.
So.
And that's fine. He did his thing, and now he's going to go play lacrosse, and that's great. But that started the clock on finding a transfer quarterback in the portal for 2024 because they're not ready to hand the reins over to Steve Angeli or Kenny Minchie or true freshman CJ Carr. They're just not ready to do that yet. This is a one-year bridge to get them to their homegrown, developed quarterbacks. That's the plan, right? And I also feel like they're really not ready to hand it over to Steve Angeli because he is the third year in the program or will be at that time. He'd be a true junior. Like if you were sold on Steve Angeli as the face of your program, then you would feel comfortable handing the reins over to him. I think they crossed him out of the the conversation. They still want him on the team. They still want him to be a part of it. And again, this is me talking. It's not like I have inside information, but now it's like, okay, if we're not sold on him, are we sold on Kenny Minchie as a true second-year redshirt freshman, essentially quarterback being the face of the team in 2024? Obviously, the answer was no. So they target who they think is the best quarterback in the portal, and they get him. I mean, there's people that think, Cam Ward or whatever is the best quarterback, or is it Riley Leonard? What? It doesn't matter. Notre Dame thinks that Riley Leonard is the best quarterback in the portal for them.
Dylan Gabriel's pretty good too, but he's already spoken for, obviously. But to your point, yeah.
But they obviously didn't make a run at Dylan Gabriel. They made a run at Riley Leonard. He was their number one guy on their board, and that's who they ended up coming away with. And so, kudos to the staff for knowing what they wanted and making it happen. And as they said before, wide receivers aren't committing here as transfer guys unless they know who the quarterback is. And so again, worst kept secret on the planet as far as transfer people go is that Riley Leonard was coming to Notre Dame.
Absolutely. Jess, we'll go around the horn. I mean, we've discussed him here a little bit, and there's some comments we'll kind of throw in there. I do want to tell you what, before we do that, I want to clarify. I think maybe it kind of got clarified in the chat, but just in case people didn't see it, and for people obviously listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see it. So Bryce was saying, I think Riley Leonard is a bigger pickup than Hartman. He has 2 years of eligibility, and his ability to run is huge. He does only have 1 year of eligibility. He just finished his junior season. He was a freshman, as Josh says, in 2021. Then he played 7 games as a true freshman, and then he played a full season last year in 2022, and he played 7 games this year as well. So he is over the limit in all 3 seasons. 2020 was the COVID season, so he doesn't get an extra year. Freshmen in 2020 were the last freshman class to get that extra year of eligibility. So it's going to be another one and done type situation. It's not going to be 2 years for him.
And that's what Notre Dame wanted. They don't want a guy to be here for 2 years.
And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. So.
Right. That's not the plan. Like I am curious to see if they would have gone after Riley Leonard if he had 2 years of eligibility left, to be perfectly honest with you. Maybe they think that, okay, he only needs 1 year. He can boost his draft stock, whatever, and then he'll be out the door. But they wanted a guy for 1 year. I mean, that is very clear that they did not want a guy that's going to come here and start for 2 years.
Exactly, because of kind of what we were just talking about, that clock on their own development and getting their guys going that they're recruiting, because they've got a lot more talent coming in, obviously, from these high school quarterbacks with, Minchie, CJ Carr, and Deuce Knight, coming in and the whole thing, so like doing a bang up job, recruiting right now. So Jess, what do you like most about what Leonard is going to potentially bring to the Irish offense now?
I think the number one thing that I would be excited for is his dynamic playmaking ability in terms of, designed run plays and running kind of true RPO concepts. And then also when the ability to extend plays when the pocket breaks down, like when when we watched, and it's not to the same degree. So before I have to clarify that before people in the chat get on me. It's like Caleb Williams, like how frustrating was it when Notre Dame played at USC 2 years ago, and it felt like every time Caleb Williams was under pressure, he was avoiding the pocket, making a run, or finding a way to throw the ball on the run. That's the ability that Riley Leonard brings, in my opinion. And when you have the talent that they have at running back, I think you can get really creative in terms of your RPO scheme, maybe potentially having, two backs on the field at the same time, but just things here and there to fully utilize, Leonard as a runner, and the running backs that can kind of go with him. And of course, the passing game that's going to come off of it, because you're going to have to commit an extra player into the box, depending on who you are defensively, to account for Riley Leonard. So that should give you, favorable matchups in the passing game, etc. So just when you add the ability to be dynamic and extend plays and run, design runs, it makes the defense's job that much harder. It's one more thing to be responsible about.
Vince?
Sorry, dealing with some extras in here. No,
that's what happens when you get called at the last minute and you have to do it from your office. So
I got the brood here at this basketball game. But no, I am not as sold as Brian and Ryan based on their show this afternoon. That doesn't mean I'm not excited about the potential. It doesn't mean I don't think it's the right move. It's just I need to sit back and watch some more film of Riley Leonard and see what he brings to the table, specifically when he's healthy. Right, guys, you can't be talking right now. Go away. So I'm very interested to see what that looks like, but they are adding an element to this offense that they haven't had in a long time. They had a runner in Ian Book, but it wasn't like Riley Leonard as a runner. Riley Leonard is 6'3".
He's beefed up.
Like this is a completely different scenario. They're going to be running. They're going to be running read option. They're going to be doing, RPOs, but RPO, people clearly don't understand what an RPO is, and that's kind of frustrating. But, they're going to run read option where there's
a difference between read option and RPO.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
So there's going to be a lot of different options. You're going to see a different offense from this team. I mean, it's going to be an adjusted offense, because if they go and they run the Sam Hartman offense with Riley Leonard, why did you go get Riley Leonard? You could have had Steve Angeli and done exactly that. So they're going to change some stuff to adapt to what Riley Leonard does well. He runs the football really, really well, Sean.
Yes, you're exactly right. And that's, like you, when news about him started popping up during the season and people started talking about I wasn't necessarily thrilled either. And maybe part of it is because we've just gotten so used to seeing what the Notre Dame offense has been the last few years. And now we watched it this season, and I don't think we necessarily know what the Notre Dame offense is, or at least what the Jared Parker offense is. But as we've said, maybe going out and getting a guy like Riley Leonard signals more of what Jared Parker wants from his offense, with what you were just talking about, the RPOs and those kind of things. And along those lines, I just, the thing that I love the most watching him, the toughness, the competitiveness, the physicality when he needs it. You see him run through a lot of tackles, and even just like standing in the pocket out of the backfield, all of a sudden, it's like there were a couple times where he swarmed and he just breaks out of this swarm, and the next thing you know, he's 30 or 40 yards running downfield. And I've compared him to Vince Young before. And look, saying I'm comparing him to Vince Young doesn't mean that I'm saying he is Vince Young. I'm saying that there are similarities to their game, especially when you look at the stature that they each have, because they're both about the same size. In that 6'4", 6'5" range, Vince Young probably had about 20 pounds on Riley Leonard. But, they're both big, tall quarterbacks, long running strides, both of them physical, and they've got, fairly, similarities with the arm slot, kind of the way they throw, a little bit 3/4, that kind of thing. And, just the way they play is very similar. Like you can throw in some Vince Young highlights and you'll see, then throw in some Riley Leonard highlights and you'll see some similarities. Again, Leonard's a little bit, trimmer, and maybe that's the thing is, especially if you are going to be that physical and run as much as he does, another 10 or 12 pounds of muscle wouldn't do him any harm, especially as he looks toward, getting to the NFL and all that kind of stuff. But, at the end of the day, he had one of the best games of his career against Clemson, and they beat Clemson this year. And when I say one of the best games, I'm not talking about passing. I'm just talking about competitiveness, all those things, like his play really, and the play of their defense as well, you can say, but his play offensively is essentially what pushed Duke to the win in that game in the season opener. And it's not like Clemson didn't, have any film on him. He played the whole season the year before. They had a full off season to scout Riley Leonard, and he still tore him apart, mostly with his legs. But, so his play beat Clemson, and unfortunately, Sam Hartman had one of his worst games against Clemson this year. So you really like the competitiveness and just a lot of the intangibles that Riley Leonard brings to the table, or at least I do.
Yeah, and one last point, Brian made this point in his show earlier today, and I thought it was a good one, was that, one of the things Marcus Freeman did before he went all in on Riley Leonard is he talked to his defensive staff about what it was like to, game plan against Riley Leonard. They said they had the worst time trying to game plan against Riley Leonard, and that's what teams are now going to have to deal with Notre Dame as, with Riley Leonard at quarterback. They're going to have to deal with Riley Leonard, and Notre Dame did a great job in the first half against Duke. If you remember watching that game, they shut Duke's offense down in the first half. What happened in the second half? Riley Leonard single-handedly brought them back in that game and arguably should have won that game because of the way he played. And, so you talk about adjustments, you talk about his legs, you talk about his playmaking ability, all of those different things, man. He made life really, really difficult for Notre Dame's really, really good defense in the second half of the game this year.
Jesse, let me throw this to you. And Vince, if you have to go at any point, we completely understand, but just let us know. Kind of piggybacking off what Vince was just talking about, Jess, you're the middle linebacker. Okay. So now it's 3rd and 8. How does Riley Leonard affect the way you have to defend the field? 3rd and 8, you're trying to prepare, you're trying to stop them.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is a lot of times on, like a long 3rd and 8 like that, you're assuming, passing routes. And so they're going to try to extend the field with different pass concepts. And then if that play isn't there, usually you see the middle of the field kind of break down of, where a potential kind of escape lane would be. And so as the play breaks down, or maybe the coverage is good and the pocket is breaking down and Riley Leonard is stepping up into the pocket, now you're left one-on-one potentially, even if you have a spy left on Riley Leonard. And if you don't, it's going to be easy, not easy, but there's that potential of, again, escaping up the middle. And then if you do have someone there, you're being asked to make a one-on-one tackle with a 6'3", 215 guy, an open field. And so it's really a headache because it's just one more thing that you have to worry about ultimately. And you can defend the play perfectly, but if you don't account for the quarterback's ability to, make an escape route somewhere, it can feel like a failed play. And so it's really frustrating when you do everything right, but the one thing you don't account for is potentially a quarterback, and now he scrambles and the drive continues, and now you have a whole nother series of downs to try to stop him.
Would you rather face Leonard or Hartman in that situation? One, you've got a little bit more precise passer for the most part in Hartman, but he's going to stay in the pocket most likely, even though he can scramble. But obviously, that Leonard is a true threat with his legs in that situation. Which kind of quarterback would you rather face?
I would much rather face someone like Hartman because, again, like it's almost adding like another option to the arsenal of what could potentially happen. And I know that Sam Hartman is probably a better thrower as the play breaks down, or the potential to read defense. But the thing is, like, Hartman struggled against some of the better defenses, and as the pocket was collapsing, he really didn't do much to extend plays. And so I think for that, in that regard, I like Riley Leonard's ability to extend plays when everything seems to go wrong, or maybe it's a broken play, and he has the ability, he gives you that chance more so than Hartman did to extend the play in some regards. And I think another thing that's hard with Riley Leonard is you can never lose sight of him. And so if you're playing man to man, and you even, think about potentially, looking out as a linebacker to see, diagnose the routes and try to get to your spot on the field. Well, that split second of, just turning your eyes away from the quarterback could be all you need, because it could just be a quarterback draw right up the middle. You know what I mean? It's just, I think there's just so many more layers that you add when you have a dynamic quarterback. And I mean, again, ask Notre Dame 2 years ago against USC how frustrated they were with Caleb Williams.
Sure, absolutely. I was just making the Vince Young comparison. TD4ND says I'd take Vince Young. Well, I mean, come on. Vince Young was Vince Young. I mean, like, you can make a case that he, and like, they vacated the Heisman that season for one, and he finished runner-up to Reggie Bush. So he's got a claim to the Heisman if he actually wanted it. From what I understand, he actually turned down the opportunity to get that. But I mean, like, he was the second best player in the country, and he led his team to a national championship that season. It's like, yeah, I'd take Vince Young too. I'm just saying there are similarities, because of, the way they play and the way they, just the whole thing. There's some similarities in the games there. That's all I'm saying. I would still take Vince Young though right now as well. But that doesn't mean, ask me at the end of next season. Let's see where we are. Jess?
Can you bring up that Josh Phillips comment, the most recent one in the chat? I think that's something that's a very valid question. He's basically saying, my only concern with Riley is what's stopping teams from loading the box and forcing him to beat you with his arm. I think that's essentially why Notre Dame went to the transfer portal at wide receiver and got the guy out of FIU and Clemson, especially the FIU guy. They want to load the box. You let that guy just go man on man with someone and throw quick slants. Assume that your guy is going to beat them and throw slants or outs over the middle. Just shorter concept passing routes and just let them beat you. And I think that's
still got to call slants though. Like it's like still got to call slants. We haven't seen that all the time. That's still something that has to appear.
Yeah, I guess though that the main thing I was getting at is I feel like that this question specifically was answered or thought of by Notre Dame coaches. And that's, I know they had lack of depth at wide receiver to begin with, but I feel like they went out and got even more kind of proven explosive guys in terms of the pass game that could help you win one-on-one matchups if teams decide they want to load the box more.
Sure. So Rudy Wave 84, how does Riley compare with Sam in making reads, working through progressions? And, based on, we've kind of talked about this before, and then I'll let Vince kind of answer some of the stuff that I have read, some of the, kind of scouting report type stuff from actual, scouts on Riley Leonard is the progression stuff. They rate him, I believe it was like a 6 out of 10, in that range. So a little bit above average. I think that that's definitely something that when you look at his game that needs to be improved. Just the ability to, to make more than one or two reads and then take off running type of thing. I think that there's definitely a lot that he can still grow at in that department.
I would say I would not compare him to Sam Hartman because Sam Hartman was terrible at that the second half of the season. So,
and that's what's crazy because it seemed like that was a strength of his.
I thought so coming in as well. And I think, to be honest with you, again, hindsight is 20/20, but you look at the offense that he came out of at Wake Forest, there wasn't like 2-3 reads. It was handoff or throw it to the one read. Like, it was a lot of one read stuff. And so you didn't really have a chance to see him sit back in the pocket and just go through reads. And so he wasn't very good at going through reads at Notre Dame. And so I don't know that I would compare the two, because even if I said that Riley Leonard is better than Sam Hartman, I don't think that's setting the bar very high, to be perfectly honest with you. So I need to go back and watch a little bit more film on Riley Leonard and see him sitting in the pocket, going through reads and things like that, watching his head. Is he looking off a safety one way, coming back another way? Like, I need to see some of that stuff. I just haven't had time over Christmas break, as I'm hoping to have a little bit more time, start going through that kind of stuff. But as of right now, I mean, the jury is still out, but I would take the Sam Hartman piece of it away because that's not the comparison that I would need to make.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, watching some of Riley Leonard, the chances that I've got to see some of his stuff, I mean, he has a good completion percentage, but you also don't see him making a lot of contested throws. There's not a lot of 50-50 balls, not a lot of back shoulder type stuff.
Sure.
You don't see him thread the needle a lot. Once or twice, you'll see it, but the majority of his throws that you see haven't looked like that. And so, that's, again, you don't see a lot of the deep shots downfield even and that kind of stuff. You'll see, a nice, little fade and stuff like that. Now, can he work it, beyond the hashes and that kind of thing? Yeah, he can do that kind of stuff. I'm not saying he's got a weak arm by any point. Yeah.
He's got a strong arm this way.
Right.
I haven't seen a lot of deep balls, to be honest.
There are other parts to his game that we haven't seen them ask him to do in that Duke offense.
Right.
I think the best comparison that I could give Riley Leonard to in terms of offense is like Jalen Hurts. The way that they ask him to run the offense with the Eagles, I feel like is very similar. Like Jalen Hurts doesn't take a ton of downfield throws. He does, design quarterback runs. They do RPOs where it's very quick, get the ball out. And he lets his wide receivers do the work. It's DK Metcalf, it's Devontae Smith, it's Goddard when he's healthy. They're not asking him
AJ
to
Brown.
I know
AJ Brown and DK Metcalf, look like the same guy and they played in college together. But yeah, you got them mixed. And they're actually, I think, playing against each other this week. But yeah, it's AJ Brown is the guy you're talking about.
AJ Brown, big physical wide receivers, just allowing your wide receivers to kind of do the dirty work for you. And then, another thing too, I thought might be interesting is, and I didn't realize this, the concept of, the West Coast offense.
Keep going, Jess. Vince has got to go. Thanks, Vince.
Oh, see you, Vince.
My guys.
I thought you guys were like, oh, you can't hear me. No, but the whole concept of the West Coast offense is, drop on, 1-2 drop, and you're looking at your first two reads, and if nothing is there, you're essentially dumping it down or getting it away. I think that's the type of, a tempo you'd like to see out of Riley Leonard is if he's not great in progressions and if he's not great downfield, and these are ifs, I don't know 100% yet, but if he's not good at those things, you can do things of, okay, 1-2 on the read. It's not there. Let's move on. Let's, maybe, run the ball, scramble out. Let's dump it down to a running back, whatever that might be. I think that there are definite ways that you can build around him. And those were the two kind of examples that came to mind.
Yeah. TD4 indeed, did Leonard have the responsibility to change plays at the line of scrimmage at Duke? Based on what I saw, I don't think so. But, again, like a deeper dive on that, something maybe that we find out down the line. I don't think so, but more to be gleaned on that. Andrew says, I don't think this next year is about Leonard. It's about Parker. He better put in offensive adjustments that appeal to Leonard's best traits. Better tight end passing game, involve our athletic running back. Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. So do you, it sounds like.
Yeah. And again, if out of those RPO looks, and if teams want to play man, we talked about the slants. It is a very easy way for Notre Dame to get their dynamic backs out of the backfield, the ball. Maybe you're swinging them out. Maybe it's an out route. Maybe they're sitting underneath, potentially more screens. Whatever it might be, you have to find ways, especially when teams are going to load the box and play man, to get your favorable running backs in man-to-man situations when maybe a blitzing linebacker, maybe a linebacker that is, having to make up space to get out and guard a running back on the perimeter one-on-one, whatever it might be. I think there's a lot of ways, again, mainly revolving around two backs and RPOs and read options of getting your running backs involved in the game more.
Yeah. This is a different kind of quarterback. And while the offense in general might be, like what they're going to run, you've got to play to the strengths of Riley Leonard. He plays from the pocket. He's not necessarily, a big rollout, throw on the run kind of guy. He'll stand in the pocket, but then, when things start to break down, that's when you see him take off. And they obviously do some design stuff as well. But you've got to find a way to play to the strengths of this particular quarterback, especially one with 3 years of experience who, before that injury against Notre Dame, he was being hyped, man. Like he was getting a lot of NFL talk for this year, and that changed.
Yeah, he was a
injury.
first-round grade, pretty much.
Yep. So yeah, you've got to build around him. DK says, now that we got rid of Vince, can we be honest about everything? Oh, DK. I wanted to talk about this because the Buckner stuff was coming up in the chat, and Pat says, can Buckner walk on the football team, scout team stuff? Look, if Tyler Buckner wants to just be a scout team quarterback, I mean, I suppose there's a conversation to be had with Marcus Freeman and Jared Parker and company. But, Tyler Buckner is already committed to play lacrosse for Notre Dame. And that in itself, plus being a Notre Dame student, is a big commitment. Playing one sport and being a student at Notre Dame is a huge commitment. So that's like, he's really got to want to be, just part of the football team if all he's going to do is show up and be a scout team quarterback, because I saw like the stuff about scholarships and all that, because then the other aspect of this is, because lacrosse gives partial scholarships, just like with Jordan Faison this year, if Tyler Buckner were somehow thrust into action next season as a walk-on who's got a partial scholarship, then the football team has to be responsible for a full scholarship for him. As soon as he plays one snap with the football team, he's got to be given a full scholarship. So there's a lot more than just, well, Tyler Buckner's been here before, he's coming back with the lacrosse team. Can't he just be a scout team quarterback or whatever? I mean, there's a lot of desire that he's got to have just to roll out there and be the scout team quarterback, because again, looking at where they are now with the quarterback situation, not to mention the quarterback situation that they kind of thrust, that he kind of thrust them into by leaving after last year. There's a lot more than just saying, hey, Tyler Buckner, come back and be a scout team quarterback. There's a lot more to it.
Quite honestly, I'm just done with the Tyler Buckner talk. And I think that Tyler Buckner is done with football. I think Notre Dame is done with Tyler Buckner and his potential playing football at Notre Dame. I think he came back to Notre Dame and realized that's where he wanted to finish his degree. And he found a way to continue to be athletic and competitive, and that's playing lacrosse. Look, I don't think that anyone is just going to come and say, hey, you can use me as a scout team quarterback.
Yeah.
Like, it's already that he's already got a full-time commitment with one sport, and then you add, full-time commitment for a second sport where there's nothing, like, there's no reward for you, right? Like, you're just showing up and essentially helping out by being a scout team quarterback. There's no guaranteed playing time. There's no guaranteed anything. And so it's just like, I feel like it's just done and over with. I think the only reason why it's news is because he is coming back to Notre Dame in general, but it's just over. Like, I don't think Tyler Buckner wants to play football again. I think that's all over with, and that's where it should be. It's just settled. Like, they have way better options at this point. Everyone has moved on.
Yes. And as Bryce just noted, I mean, he was a highly recruited. He was a top lacrosse recruit in the nation. So this is a legit, he obviously hasn't played lacrosse for a few years, but this is a legit lacrosse player that they're going to get. And they also are going to sign the #1 lacrosse recruit in the country. And he's going to do the Faison thing next fall as well, where he's going to walk on to the football team. We'll see where that ends up going. But I mean, they just won a national championship, and they're getting as a result, they've gained a lot of recruiting momentum, and the fact that they're getting Buckner back is actually big for the lacrosse team potentially. So like let him, if he wants to play lacrosse, let him play lacrosse and get that figured out. A couple of different things. Joe, I'm going to say one of your questions that you had about Minchie and Angeli for rapid fire, because we've got a similar question coming up there. But Joe says, while I agree that Leonard raises the ceiling of the team, given the upcoming schedule next year, does he add wins that wouldn't normally be there? Finally, are you concerned about how he fits? I mean,
I don't think he potentially adds wins, but I think he gives you a better in the games where you might be the underdog or where it's going to be more of a fight. I think he gives you more in those type of games, essentially. So I don't. He might add a win or two, like maybe a win, but again, I think he's going to be most important in those games where like it really matters, assuming they make a playoff or whatever it might be. I think that's the main role of where Riley Leonard fits and why he was brought in, because it's not just getting there, it's excelling in those games.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest games that you've got coming up next year are going to be Louisville, Florida State, Texas A&M, and then probably USC number 4 after that, depending on how USC is able to hit the portal and address their needs next year. But yeah, I don't think that he necessarily adds, but by having him, you have like look at the Notre Dame Ohio State game. And I'm definitely not trying to take away, like put any positive spin on, oh, you played close and that's a good thing or whatever. But my point is, would that game have been as close if you didn't have Sam Hartman last year? Like would it have come right down to the wire? You're within a field goal at the end. I think that at the very least, by having a guy of the level of Riley Leonard, you are at least in a highly competitive game. And without him, like if you have one of these rookie quarterbacks next year, I think you're worrying a heck of a lot more about whether or not you're going to win that game than if you have Riley Leonard, right?
Yeah, I agree.
The fit, again, I'm not worried about. I'm definitely not worried about like the off-field stuff. You look at the video, and I think it was Xavier Watts and Benjamin Morrison that was with him in the video that he put out today, and just everything that you hear, and like he definitely seems all in on Notre Dame. I think that that it is why this was really kind of a foregone conclusion that it ever happened. So I'm not worried about any of the sort of intangible, how he connects, that kind of stuff. And from his game standpoint, again, it's on Jared Parker now to adjust what he's going to do around the skill set that Riley Leonard brings. You don't bring in a quarterback like this and try to make him that proverbial square peg in a round hole. You've got to play to his strengths. That's what the whole thing is about if you're bringing in a guy like Riley Leonard. Joe asked if I am still refreshing Twitter over and over today. Once this announcement was made, no, I was not refreshing Twitter over and over today like I was yesterday. D-Rock Irish said, North Carolina State podcaster said former Clemson wide receiver Bo Collins is a receiver where a 50-50 ball would turn into 80-20 reception by Collins. Solid pickup. I like that. The guy's got skills. It's part of why they went out and got him. Let me see. Beefeater NDOA. He said this may be the Chick-fil-A peppermint milk chocolate shake talking, but what is the point of high school recruiting now that they can just buy players in the portal? Dante Moore is cheap now. One, I wouldn't want to go after. I wouldn't have wanted to go after Dante Moore after all the drama in recruiting that led him to committing, decommitting, Oregon. Then he ends up at UCLA, and now after 1 year, he's leaving UCLA. I mean, would you really want that? But just look at where the Heisman trophies are going. What is it? 5 of the last 7 Heisman winners are transfer guys. Like it's where college football is right now. And we talked about it last week. This is essentially the free agent era of college football. And I get what you're saying, but I think that if they stick to what their plan is right now, that this is going to be, at least for the short term, the last time they go to the portal to get a guy like this. They address a short-term need, and with the receivers that they've added and with more additions that they're planning to make, I think it makes them a definite college football playoff contender right away. Whereas even though, there is a case to be made for developing your own guys, I think that you're probably more in the we're hoping to be in the college football playoff picture than we're planning to be in the college football playoff picture with what they've gone out and done with this kind of move. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like it's just we've entered essentially a new way of playing college football, and I think you can be silly like someone like Dabo Sweeney, and be resentful to kind of the changes, or you can be open and embrace them. And Notre Dame is willing to be proactive and say, hey, our quarterback situation is not where we want it to be. That's not how we anticipate it to be forever, but we also want to be competitive now. We want to win now. And so I think you can do both of those things simultaneously. And that's the number one benefit to the portal to me, is you can still, if you have a lot of talent elsewhere, you can still go out and fill the void while also developing guys in the background. The thing
you
is,
can supplement your roster. You can supplement your roster with it. Yep.
And so to me, like, that's all fine and dandy, but the measuring stick is, one, how does this offense adapt to Riley Leonard's skills? And two, is that the offense that you're going to run in the future? And how are you going to develop those guys in the background again? Because it's one thing to say, hey, we're just doing this 1 year. And then a year later, you can't be like, oh yeah, we're just doing this for a year because we're developing. And so I truly still need to see that development, but I'm still appreciative of Notre Dame's proactiveness to go out and willingness to win now, because the rest of their roster is loaded in a lot of areas. And so it's just, you have to do things to kind of keep everyone up to the same playing level.
Yeah. Troll Sniper says this is definitely a temporary fix. They aren't recruiting CJ Carr and Deuce Knight with the intent of going back to the portal for a quarterback. It's a quick fix. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look what, again, you got the quarterback, you got two very experienced receivers who can play outside specific kinds of receivers. One can, one's more boundary, one is more field. You've got one of each with all these slot guys that you've got. I'll save that talk for, rapid fire, because we're going to talk some receivers with that in a little bit. But they've addressed some specific needs already. And, Jordan Clark on the other side of the ball to be a nickel guy. And, they're not done with the transfer portal either. There's still potentially, including one big move that could be happening here in the very near future. One that I think would be considered pretty big, but they're not done. They're not done. There's still moves that they're going to be making in the portal. Andrew says, I like Leonard's big game experience, played very well in the second half against Notre Dame. Also, game 1 versus Clemson was a big game. Clemson was fully healthy, and he beat them with his feet. And that's definitely, like, when you look at, I know that I've seen some Irish fans say, well, I'm not impressed with him, from what they saw in the Notre Dame game. And, that's probably the biggest impression that a lot of Notre Dame fans do have of Riley Leonard, is how he played in that game. Let's not forget how good Notre Dame's defense is, though, and the fact that, they made him look that way for a majority of the game. But as you just said, he led them back. They had the lead. They got the lead back. He had a nice second half. They made some adjustments against Notre Dame's defense. He made some throws, and he made some plays with his feet as well. But the Irish were able to pull it out in the end, fortunately. But he went up against some good defenses this year, and I do like the experience that he had going up against. Like I said before, he beat Clemson. Like, the reason they beat Clemson was because of the way their defense played and because of what Riley Leonard, the kind of plays that he was able to make predominantly with his legs in that game. And it's definitely another element that we're going to see to the offense that we really, that we haven't really seen since Brandon Wimbush. But the difference is this guy can throw more consistently and more accurately than Brandon Wimbush, even though, he's, again, there's some areas of, in terms of accuracy where he can improve, but he's going to be a lot more accurate than Wimbush was.
Agreed.
With that, Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been chugging this coffee all day in preparation. Let's do it.
All right. So fill in the blank. Blank needs to happen next season to validate Riley Leonard transferring to Notre Dame.
A playoff appearance needs to happen next season in order to validate Notre Dame getting Riley Leonard at starting quarterback. I think that is, with the expansion and given, what is coming back next season, the additions at the wide receiver, your defense is probably going to be, hopefully just as good. I think that you go out and make this move, and it is a playoff or bust type situation, in my opinion.
I completely agree. That is what this move is about. That is what the other moves that they've made already that we've talked about are about. It is about being a playoff team next year. Like you look at where Marcus Freeman is as a head coach, disappointing first season. This season, I think, at least to an extent, has to be viewed as disappointing because of all of the expectations that came with going out and getting an experienced quarterback like Sam Hartman. They end up in the Sun Bowl, still in a bowl game. There is still at least a little bit of a hint of a silver lining. They've got a chance to win 10 games this season, but that would be a really nice springboard toward next year. If they can get that 10, and then with all these additions that they're making, starting with this, going out and getting another really experienced quarterback and a guy who can play the position, being in the playoff is where it is, especially now that they're expanding to 12. I think that has to be a realistic expectation for this team year in and year out going forward, with the playoff expanding to 12. And if they are not in the playoff next year with Riley Leonard and everything else, I think that it would be a major disappointment. So adding Riley Leonard says we plan on being in the playoffs next year, and that's what would validate this move. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and Joe brought this up in an earlier chat question, do you think we lose either Minchie or Angeli, is what Joe said. And my question is, scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that Riley Leonard, Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, and CJ Carr are all going to be in training camp with the Irish next August? Scale of 1 to 10.
I put this as a 4 out of 10. So I only think that there's about a 40% chance that this happens. I think Minchie is definitely there. I think Carr is definitely there. I think Leonard is definitely there. I think that the real question mark is Steve Angeli, and what he deems to be of priority, right? Like, does he go out and basically do the Drew Pine and say, hey, I think that I could be a starting quarterback at maybe a smaller, Division I around the country. I don't know exactly where that's at. Or does he stick it out and continue to develop and earn his degree? But I don't think that, and if they run an offense how I think they're going to, I just don't think Angeli really fits into it schematically as well. And I would say, in simplest terms, I think he's more of a Sam Hartman quarterback than he is a Riley Leonard quarterback. And if the offense is going to be changed around Riley Leonard, and then the incoming of Minchie and CJ Carr and Deuce Knight, those seem like more guys who are realistic to run kind of a dual threat type of offense. I just don't know how much Steve Angeli fits into that dual threat option. And so I think he's the guy who would be the guy to leave, essentially. So I'm going to put it at a 4 out of 10.
You're putting it at a 4. I'm giving it a 2.5. And again, we're talking about the confidence that all 4 of those guys, Leonard, Angeli, Minchie, and Carr, that all 4 will be in training camp with Notre Dame next August. I put it at a 2.5. I think Henry agrees with me, quite frankly. But, when we were leaving the Blue Gold game last spring, one of the other guys on the beat said, well, that's the last time we're going to see those 3 quarterbacks together again. And of course, he was talking about Hartman, Buckner, and Angeli. And it's funny because, it hadn't really had it crossed my mind that somebody could transfer, I guess, but I really hadn't even considered it that deeply because the whole spring, everyone was just saying and they were saying the right things. Tyler Buckner and the coaches, everyone, it was just, like the right talk, saying all the right things about competition and everything else. And then before you knew it, boom, Tyler Buckner was gone, and the plan was supposed to be you get Hartman for a year, then Tyler Buckner was going to, most likely be the starting quarterback this coming up year. So nothing surprises me anymore in the transfer portal world. At the end of the day, guys want to play. I wouldn't have necessarily thought that Drew Pine was going to leave when he did, but he did. So I will be pleasantly surprised if all of them are back next year, but I just because of, especially how things happened last year. And I realize everyone's a little bit different and kind of, the mentality that they have is a little bit different, but I would be shocked at the end of spring if we don't see some more movement. That's just kind of the world that we live in. And, between this and going back to what we were just talking about, Tom says, I just don't know how to forecast wins and losses for 2024 because of the huge portal turnover on every team. We just have to be patient to see what happens after the third or fourth week next year. And I mean, that's absolutely true as well. I mean, just like look at Colorado and all the, what everyone was saying about Colorado. And, they had one win last year and they completely overhauled their roster. And I think most people thought, probably would have been shocked if they even got to 2 wins. They got to 4. Is that a successful season? Well, probably in Prime's mind, there's some success. But I mean, again, like, how could anyone have any idea what to expect out of Colorado with the complete overhaul of that roster that they did? And it's going to be, you're not going to see teams make as big an overhaul as he did, but with thousands of guys in the portal, I mean, it's a fair point. It's hard to figure out, from going from one season to the next, just what it's going to look like. Like, how are you even going to pick bowl games based on all these portals and opt-outs and everything else that are going on? I'll take it that's your agreement with that. You're on mute.
Sorry, can you put that comment back up there again, or is it lost forever in the abyss?
I think it's probably lost now. I can try to go back and find it. He said he just doesn't know what to make, how to pick. Here it is.
Oh, I know what I was going to get at. Sorry. I think when you start talking about Colorado, I think the number one thing is, when you have a lot of turnover in the transfer portal, you introduce a new coaching staff, you introduce new players, you introduce new schemes. You don't know how any of that's all going to look until there's film out there. And so like this was saying, and like you were saying, kind of have to wait for the dust to settle in the first couple of weeks, because I don't think it's truly indicative of who these teams are, because again, everyone, not only are those players and everything getting used to each other, but the rest of the country is getting used to them, right? Because again, you don't know what the players are going to look like. You don't know what that scheme is going to look like. And so until there's a couple games of film, that's when it becomes a little bit easier. So I do agree. I think you kind of wait to see, outside of the first couple of weeks, how things are going to settle.
Yep, for sure. So this year's Notre Dame scholarship receivers room, this is what it looked like coming into the season. Chris Tyree, Tobias Merriweather, Jaden Thomas, Dion Colsey, Matt Salerno, Jaden Greathouse, Braylon James, Rico Flores, and an injured KK Smith. As of now, next year's wide receivers room will be Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, Jaden Thomas, Dion Colsey, Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, Logan Saldana, Cam Williams, and Micah Gilbert. What's your confidence in this group compared to last year's group? Like, which group do you have more confidence in? Like, if you were just like, think about how you felt maybe kind of going into the season. Try to, if you can, take out what ended up happening, I guess.
Yeah.
Which one are you more confident in? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm more confident in next year's group, and that's not just optimism. I'll tell you why. Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, those guys cancel each other out because they're both coming back, right? And then you would hope that they would be better because some injuries limited this year. Jaden Greathouse cancels out with Jaden Greathouse, but you would expect in year 2 that he would be better than he was in year 1. I think that you can have similar hype and anticipation with Cam Williams like you did with Rico Flores. Obviously, Rico Flores had game experience, so you're losing out on that. And I think Jordan Faison kind of becomes the new Chris Tyree. And then Chris Mitchell is the Chris Tyree that we thought we were going to get last season. He is the proven production type of player that Chris Tyree was, a fast slot guy. I think that I'm more confident about this year because Chris Mitchell has proven. We thought we had an idea of what Chris Tyree could be, but Chris Tyree hadn't proven anything yet. Chris Mitchell has proven it, and he's played.
And Tobias Merriweather had neither.
Right, and he's potentially playing, you could say he played on a worse team as well. And so if you're introduced to a better quarterback, a better system, etc., you would hope that Chris Mitchell would get better. So that's where I am on that. And then in terms of Collins, I think Collins is a proven Tobias Merriweather at the end of the day. And so you have 2 guys who are really proven, and now you're bringing back guys who are, have experience that were injured. You have Jaden Greathouse, who benefited from getting a lot of playing time early due to injuries, and et cetera. And so I feel like the number one thing that gives me more confidence about next season is we had anticipatory thoughts of who we thought, Tobias Merriweather would be, who we thought Chris Tyree would be. But at the end of the day, I feel like Collins is who we want Tobias to be, and Mitchell is who we thought Tyree was going to be. And so you introduce potentially a better quarterback, a better team, a better offensive line. I think that would give you more confidence at the end of the day.
Yeah, if I'm going to make a pro analogy, and I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, you're basically trading Tyree, Tobias, Braylon James, Rico Flores for Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell, and then you went out and signed some undrafted free agent, in Jordan Faison, and then you draft 3 stud rookies in Saldana, Williams, and Gilbert, all of them 4-star guys. So you are like Collins and Mitchell combined for 102 receptions in over 1,600 yards and 10 touchdowns. The 4 guys you gave up in this hypothetical analogous trade or metaphorical trade, they've got high upside, but they combine for just 68 catches and a little over 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. So you're trading future upside for proven track records. And again, going back to kind of the theme of what we've talked about throughout this show by some of these, but by getting Riley Leonard and these receivers, you're trading future upside for right now. And you're hoping also, like, one of the sort of X factors in this whole thing is you also got rid of the position coach and you're bringing in a new position coach, and you're banking that makes a big impact as well. So it stinks that you had to lose some young talent, but they lost a guy going into year 3 that had 15 career catches in his first 2 years, and they, again, made moves to win now. And I'm much more confident as well in this 24 group that they're going to have next year. But at the same time, they still do have to go out and produce. We kind of got to see it now. And that's what we've been waiting for a couple of years.
Now we just get to talk about it for 6 more months.
9 more months. So Zeke Correll announced that he's going to transfer to North Carolina State, and Braylon James is going to TCU. Speaking of the transfers, what do you think about these moves?
I never understood Zeke Correll transferring. And I only say that because he's a first-year grad student. And so I guess his thought process would be, okay, I finished my time at Notre Dame. I have my degree. It's time to potentially move on as a grad transfer. And I guess I don't know what he's looking to fulfill, because I feel like at Notre Dame, he had a better chance of maybe proving who he is or getting a better NFL grade, because Notre Dame is known for really good offensive linemen. And so I felt like if that's the goal, that he had a better chance at Notre Dame. And to me, the only thing that could potentially, warrant a transfer is he nervous about what is coming behind him, right? Has he hit his ceiling in terms of talent wise? And was he a guy out there because of hard work, knowing, where he was supposed to be and how to navigate the rest of his offensive linemen? But has it gotten to the point in practice, or, did the coaches have a conversation with him potentially of, hey, this guy might be moving ahead of you, in coming years,
some of those
whatever it might
postseason
be.
conversations, like, was there a mutual agreement potentially that, hey, it might be best to move on, that kind of
And
thing.
I think that is the honest conversation that he must have had, because again, I don't feel like you're in a better chance or better position at NC State compared to Notre Dame. And so I feel like the move was strategically done because he was going to get passed up and likely wasn't going to be a starter next year. Braylon James, hard to really comment about his because we didn't really get to see him play, but he's going to TCU. So it makes me feel like he wants to get back home because he is from Texas. So that would be, on the outside observations on both of those guys, one would be better chance to play. And then the other one would be, again, going closer to home.
Yeah. I mean, NC State had a big exodus of their own when the portal opened last week. They lost 15 guys on the first day, and Carell's going to go in. And like you said, he's going to have a chance to keep playing. And that's what you do wonder, like, how much those private conversations, the postseason conversation, like how much that came into play. And TD4ND was saying something about the offensive line coach. And look, I think that next year is going to be just as important for Joe Rudolph as this year was for Al Washington. Like, there were not major issues with this offensive line. They were good at times, but just like the quarterback and the team as a whole, how did they stack up against the better competition? That's where they kind of left some things to be desired. I think there is definitely like Joe Rudolph, especially because he is going to have a completely, revamped, overhauled offensive line next year. There's going to be a lot for Joe Rudolph to show. And I think it's going to be, like I said, just as important for him as this season was for Al Washington, because Al Washington really showed himself this year with the way that defensive line developed over the course of the season. I think people feel, or at least they should feel, a lot differently about him than they were probably feeling coming into the season.
Yeah. In terms of offense, huge years for Jared Parker and Joe Rudolph. I think a lot will say, depending on their success will be, and I know that's easy to say, but a lot of this team's success, I think, is predicated around what those two can accomplish on offense.
Yeah. So former Notre Dame soccer player Brandon Aubrey is now the kicker for the Dallas Cowboys. He kicked field goals of 59 and 60 yards Sunday night against the Eagles to become the first kicker in NFL history to kick 2 field goals of 59 plus yards in the same game. And now I've seen some rumblings about people like, why didn't Brandon Aubrey ever kick when he was with the Notre Dame football team? Well, it's interesting, Jess, because just before this show started, Brandon Aubrey was on the Dan Patrick Show.
Yes, he was.
Did you see this clip?
I caught bits and pieces of it. I think I know what you're referencing.
So here is Dan Patrick asking Brandon Aubrey, the former Notre Dame soccer player, current Dallas Cowboys kicker, that very question.
Went to Notre Dame. Did you think about kicking for the football team?
No, not once. Never crossed my mind.
So what do you think about all this, Jess?
Well, first of all, I think it's like very Jerry Jones to find the kicker off the streets that no one's heard of and just be completely willing to roll the dice on him. And so I think that's very cool, honestly, first of all, for the Cowboys. But, I mean, it's so hindsight and easy to say, like, oh, why wasn't he kicking at Notre Dame? The man was on a full scholarship on a national championship program at Notre Dame and playing men's soccer. Like, it's not like the football team just walks over to soccer practice and has open tryouts for all these kickers and
for
says,
every soccer player. Yeah.
Right. And so, honestly, he got to this guy also made it into the MLS, right? And so the dream or thought was never about football. It was his own dream and soccer. And so once that dream kind of finally came to an end, I think he wanted to find a way to continue his career as a professional athlete. And if you go back and listen to the Dan Patrick clip, his, I think, girlfriend or wife is the one who was like, hey,
Yeah.
why don't you give kicking a try if you don't?
Here's the thing with Brandon Aubrey. He's from Plano, Texas, which is right, near Dallas. He didn't play high school football. He was not a kicker in high school. He was just a soccer player. He played soccer at Notre Dame from 2013 to 2017. He had never played football. So he finishes Notre Dame. He's drafted by the MLS. He plays for a couple years, and then he gets cut, and he's got a Notre Dame degree. He decides he's going to be a software engineer. So one day in 2019, him and his wife are sitting on the couch watching an NFL game, and a kicker misses a field goal, and his wife is like, you could do that. And so the next thing you know, he starts working with this former Mississippi State kicker, and like he literally was doing this for 2 or 3 years, working with this, kicker specialist. This is not even being on a football team. And then he tries out for the USFL. He does pretty well with the Birmingham Stallions for a couple of years, and he turns that into an NFL career. So there's no possible way that Brian Kelly or anyone else could have had any inkling, because Brandon Aubrey didn't even have any inkling that he could turn into what he is right now.
Well, and it's just, again, I see more people being like, oh, like you have to go over there and look around. But it's just like they're already recruiting field goal kickers as is. And so it's like, if you're recruiting and developing guys as is, what thought process would you be like, hey, let's walk over to the soccer field and find guys that have never kicked before? You don't just find a kicker. Like you said, it took him 2-3 years of practice under tutelage of someone else.
He began this process of becoming a kicker in 2019. So it's 4 years. And again, he had not been a football kicker before then. It took him 2 years, I think, like 2.5 years to get the tryout with the USFL, and then, kicked for a couple years with the USFL, and then went to training camp with the Cowboys this year and kept a roster spot. So but D-Rock Irish is saying, keep looking from within. The problem with that, D-Rock, is Brandon Aubrey would not have been equipped to become that when he was at Notre Dame, because he had never been a football kicker before. Like, he would have been, like, for him, it probably would have taken him, like if he started it as a freshman, it would have taken him until his senior year, until he was actually ready to go out and kick, most likely. Like, he was a project, and he spent all of his own time getting to the point that he is right now. So, you probably could have gone out and held tryouts with a soccer team or something like that. But even Brandon Aubrey, like I said, he didn't even know back then that he was going to turn into what he's turned into.
Well, and look at the roster back when he was here. He was here from 2013 to 2016. I'm pretty sure that's the Berenza and like Yoon era. Like, they didn't have issues kicking the ball. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Those weren't issues. And so again, I don't think that you just willy-nilly go out and be like, let's see who could potentially be the fourth string kicker for us today. I don't think it's a thought that ever came to mind.
I don't either. So Brandon Aubrey has made all 30 of his field goal attempts this season. And there was actually an article that I saw today from Lawrence Tynes, who Michael Hahn is probably familiar with, former New York Giants kicker, who says he thinks it would be good for Aubrey if he missed a field goal in the regular season before the playoffs. Do you buy or sell that?
I sell that. There's no reason to miss. He's missed extra points. I don't think that it's like this, you need to handle the adversity of missing or whatever, or potentially I don't think the man feels pressure. He hit basically 260 yarders that looked like they were going to be good from 70. They were right down the middle. The guy has a boot on him. And I say that if he misses now, it actually gets him second guessing more, right?
He's in his head even more.
Yeah, he's in his head. I'm more so leaning towards just stay hot as humanly possible, because he's missed the extra points before, right? And as long as he keeps making the field goals, that's really all I care about. So I'm just going to sell this, because to me, like any hitter, you just got to stay hot for as long as possible. And when you get in a slump, and you deal with slumps when you're in a slump. You don't prepare for a slump beforehand. Again, you just stay hot as long as you can.
Yeah, this is a little bit like, like when March Madness is approaching and you've got an undefeated team going in and people start saying, well, they'd be better off if they lost a game before the tournament, get it out of your system and that kind of thing. I do think, though, I get what you're saying. He's missed some extra points. He's missed, actually, 4 extra points that I think that he's missed this season, which, is crazy considering he's out there banging 60-yard field goals and he's missing extra points. But, do you think there's something to, like, the longer a streak like this lasts, the more momentum that story gains and people start talking about it, and
more
it becomes more of a talking. But yeah, so like naturally the pressure builds. Like, I know you're not old enough to remember this, but back in '98, Gary Anderson was the kicker for the Minnesota Vikings, didn't miss a field goal all season. They get to the NFC Championship game. The game is on the line. Guess what happens? Misses a game-winning field goal. The Falcons go to the Super Bowl instead of the Vikings. So, like, I don't know. Like, the fact that he's missed some extra points, maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. Like, he has actually missed. He just hasn't missed the field goals. But, like, it just feels to me like if you were to miss, then it doesn't become this pressure point once the postseason gets here. I can see it.
Yeah, like I see both sides of the conversation, but I'm sure that everyone in Aubrey himself isn't really thinking about the streak. He's just thinking about, I need to make this field goal for my team, in this moment type situation.
Sure. So Pat McAfee announced last week that he'll return to ESPN's College Game Day next year. He's acknowledged reading social media criticisms and hearing his haters. Here's a quote from him. Quote, "I'm back. I don't love it. I don't love that my life is just going to continue to have people telling me to run into oncoming traffic, swallow a barrel," end quote. So what do you think, Jess?
So when I first read it, he said, "I'm back and I don't love it." I thought he was saying, "I don't love it" in reference to being back, but really it's in reference to all the fans and how he's treated, on social media. And I think, unfortunately, that's the era and the time that we live in is everyone's got a stage and everyone thinks that their voice needs to be heard and that it's the most important, thing to be heard. And quite honestly, if I'm Pat McAfee, throw on the blinders, bro. Like, don't read the social media stuff. Like, I get it. It's part of your job to kind of be on social media, but I still think there's ways you can navigate it without reading it. You do a good job. Your coworkers and your boss know you do a good job. And I would say that majority of the world appreciates him and loves him for what he does on that show. I mean, I do. I think he's been a great, addition and brings a different perspective and just the whole the way the dynamic. And to me, he's like a young Lee Corso that is bringing energy back into this show. And so I think you have to, if you're Pat McAfee, you need to look at all the benefits and just tune out and block all of the haters. And it's like, dude, you were a professional athlete. You were a kicker. Like
Right.
These things have existed in your life for as long as probably
You've never
you were
been
a college
criticized
kicker.
before. It does seem weird, that like he's so attuned to all this criticism. But like K-Max says, they'll hate watch anyway, and that's
right. They'll watch just so they can send off some stupid tweet.
Yeah, and because Pat McAfee is to College Game Day what Notre Dame is to college football. He's polarizing. Polarization sells. 45% tune in to see Notre Dame win, 45% tune in to see him lose, and the other 10% live in Alaska. So it's the same with Pat McAfee. He's polarizing, but it sells. It's the same reason that, the guy whose last name starts with Cow still has a job, because he's polarizing as well. Love him, like Mark May. Do you remember Mark May? Like, are you?
Oh yeah, I
remember the whole
May.
Mark May phenomenon. I mean, he was polarizing too, but people watched. Lee Corso was polarizing when he was at his peak. ESPN just released today. It's funny, like, that we were going to talk about this, and again, like within an hour before the show started, ESPN released their viewership numbers for the season. Guess what? They had their second most watched season in 12 years. So, like, I'm not saying they're all tuning in for McAfee, but people are watching the show more now. Like, people are saying they hate him. But I agree with what you're saying. It's just like stop looking at the social media, because no one's going to get on social media and tell you how great you are. They're only going to come at you with the negative stuff. So just put the social media away and quit looking at it and cash your checks. That's what it comes down to, because I'm sure they're pretty nice ones.
Brent wants to know who gets the number 1 seed in the NFC. Come on, Brent. I know you're a 49ers fan. That's who's getting it.
This is what happens when you get Niners fans jumping in, right?
And he started the show late, so he's not even going to hear this until the very tail end. Unfortunate.
The problem is the way the schedules shape up. It just it favors it favors the Eagles, but it favors the 49ers as well, because obviously they have the head-to-head against both the Cowboys and the Eagles. So if I had to guess, 49ers are going to get the number 1 seed. The Eagles are going to win the division, and the Cowboys will have the top wild card spot. They'll have to go to probably Tampa Bay to open up the playoffs.
That's what I am also anticipating.
Yeah, Tom, another good one. Paul Feinbaum, most polarizing. He's right up there as well. I don't know why I didn't think about him. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, so that's my pick, unfortunately, because the way it is weird, how different these schedules are in the month of December when you look at degree of difficulty for some teams compared to others.
Like the Eagles just got through their gauntlet and now has an easier portion, and the Cowboys are more so ending kind of with their gauntlets. They still have the Bills, the Lions, and the Dolphins before the season ends.
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
Well, and I just think, that the Cowboys just didn't do themselves any favors. I was telling you this the other night. I think the Cowboys have truly been outplayed in one game, and it's inexcusable they lost to Arizona, and it's inexcusable they lost that first game to Philadelphia, and it's had they won those games, even if they lost head-to-head to the 49ers, they're still probably in the driver's seat for the number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah. Lloyd says, what's wrong with his Lions? It would help if, they could take care of the ball a little bit better, I think. That would help them quite a bit. They might find themselves in the same position that the Rams were in a couple of years ago when they made the move to send Goff to Detroit. That could be the next move there for the Lions.
Brent says, how do you stop Brock Purdy? Brent, I'm going to have to break some news to you. I don't think Brock Purdy's a top 10 quarterback in this league. I think he's got a Deebo Samuel. He's got a Christian McCaffrey. He's got a Brandon Ayuk. He's got a George Kittle. He's got a Trent Williams. I can keep going down the list. He doesn't do the work. The cast around him does the work. He just
Trent Williams said he's not a system quarterback. What do you?
Yeah. Also, when Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel were out, that's when they went on their 2 to 3 game losing skid. I don't think those things are coincidental at all.
True.
Deebo Samuel is a yak king. Just get him the ball and he does all the work afterwards.
No, that's true. And I've kind of always when the system quarterback argument comes up, I've always thought that every quarterback is ultimately a product of their system, both good and bad. You have a good system, you're probably going to be a pretty good quarterback. You have a bad system, it's going to go the other way into the supporting cast as well. When you've got guys around you, that changes things quite a bit. This is really the first time Jalen Hurts, this little stretch that he's in right now. This is the first time he's had to really go through any turmoil of his own. And, a big part of that is teams the last couple of games have figured out a way to kind of put the clamps down on AJ Brown. How are they going to respond to that? How are they going to, they put the Cowboys put some pressure.
I love that Gilmore matchup all night.
Cowboys put some pressure on Jalen Hurts like he hasn't seen pressure before. That affected him quite a bit. They weren't able to just do their tush-push thing all the time. That affected him quite a bit, So how are they going to respond? Hey, I'm actually, with this Italian up there in New York, DeVito, I'm actually they played some close games against both the against the Commanders and the Giants, if I remember right, the first time they played. So
just not the Cowboys.
I don't think you can write either one of those off. At least I hope not anyway. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate you joining us once again this evening, talking about the big Riley Leonard news and all that comes with it. We will, I'm sure, have much more coming on are coming up over the course of this week to talk about, because there's a lot more news that we're kind of expecting is, going to continue to be announced as this week goes on. So we'll have it for you. Jess, appreciate you as well coming on at the end of a busy day doing your own work. So
I do what I can. I was only like 5 minutes late, so I hope it wasn't held against me. And we got to appreciate Vince for being on short notice.
Yep. Thanks to Vince for jumping in for a little bit as well, even if he had to yell at the kids in the meantime.
DK, I will see you at Collision Bend, tomorrow, ? You missed it, but that's like a brewery like 10 minutes from my house, not even like 5-10 minutes. And he said he's going to be there tomorrow and there's drinks free if I decide to show up.
Yep. Michael has thrown this RJ Oben crystal ball in there a couple times. Yeah, you're right. He's got a crystal ball from 24/7. And Riley Leonard had a crystal ball over the weekend from 24/7, I think, as well. And that worked out. So we'll see what happens with RJ Oben, the Duke defensive end. Hit the like button on your way out. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. We do appreciate it on your podcast platforms. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight and for all the great stuff. We will talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.